This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall. CJAD 800.
That is James Mennie over at the Montreal Gazette. I was just thinking to myself, Jim, when's the last time we heard a weather forecast that included a +1 towards the end of January? And then I thought, well, someone will call and say, yeah, it was only 2 years ago that happened. So,
well, yeah, it's or maybe like +14, and you're going to have someone like me who's going to call. Well, I remember 5 or 6 years ago, it was Christmas Eve. I saw a guy walking in his shorts. Yeah. You can't. Weather is just nonsense now,
and we can't remember from year to year. I agree. All right, let's get to our first story today. So, what's the deal now? First of all, Pierre Poilievre is in town, and he's in Quebec for the week.
So you didn't have to.
Oh, thank you.
And French-only opening statement. Nothing new in terms of the usual cassette. The country's broken. Trudeau's spending like a drunken sailor. Inflation's through the roof because of this. Not exactly, how can I put it, riddled with questions. I couldn't see who the crew was on the other side of the camera. It was basically, I guess their bosses just grabbed the first headline they saw and said, go ask him about this. He flatly denied an assertion made this morning on a local chat show by Chantal Hébert that M. Poilievre rumbled not only Éric Girard, but also Geneviève Guilbeault to be a conservative candidate for the next election. He says that is completely untrue. And apart from that, not a whole heck of a lot. The other thing, and I know he does this, but every time he does it, it always strikes me. The words conservative and party never occurred in the entire press conference. If elected, a Poilievre government will do A, B, and C. So there you have it.
Okay. So much to do, but not very much.
Well, no, what's the guy going to do?
Yeah, well,
really?
Why is he here for a week? What's the idea on an agenda for a week spent in the province?
I'm meeting with various groups. I'm going, to Trois-Rivières. I'm going to Quebec City. I'm going to Montreal. I'm going to find out. I'm going to find out what's on the minds of Quebecers. Listen, if you want, lucky thing he wasn't asking what was on Danielle Boyer's mind. That's the head of the FTQ, who they have their annual convention. Basically described. He basically said, "You let Poilievre win the next federal election, you're going to say goodbye to unions and say goodbye to social services and go back because that's the first thing they will attack." And he also sort of essentially described Éric Duhaime as, the mini-me of the Federal Conservative Party. So there you have it. I mean, this is the kind of reception he's going to get. Listen, the party's not doing well in Quebec, which is probably why he avoids mentioning it at all. But you think he would have come in with something, not necessarily a goodie, but perhaps a promise of a goodie. Nothing. It was a one-size-fits-all speech, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But frankly, if I was going into territory where I was not doing very well at all, and I need to win that territory, I'd have brought something shiny with me, as opposed to the usual battered cassette, which, my God, 8-track, it just gets shoved in, and here we go again. Everything's broken, and it's Trudeau's fault.
But you're saying he actually took questions from reporters, right? Because sometimes he doesn't even do that. He just makes a speech.
Yeah. But listen, you can't. My business has changed so much over the past 10 years, but that's one thing you can't get away with yet. You must take questions from reporters, because if you don't, people like me and Chantal Hébert and you guys fill in the gaps, and that's the last thing on earth Pierre Poilievre wants.
So my question then would be, he's here for a week. Does this give you the impression that the Conservative, or at least he, thinks an election federally is inevitable sooner rather than later, or does that tie into it at all?
I think he honest to God doesn't know. And he's just saying, listen, I'll err on the side of caution. But even if the next election doesn't happen until next year, or even the year after that, Aaron, he's got to start building some bridges around here, because, as I say, when you can't even mention the name of your own party during a press conference, quelque chose de crache on your whole plan. You cannot have that kind of a cloud following you around in a province that you must absolutely win if you want to form a majority government.
Okay. Still wondering if we're going to hear anything major from him. Maybe he's kind of holding off for a couple of days and then drops a bombshell of some kind. Not likely, but who knows?
Well, and who knows? He might do it up in Quebec City. But honestly, as I say, I think this might almost have been an exploratory, and when I say exploratory, I rather mean in kind of like, an expedition up the Orinoco River, because let's face it, he hasn't been exactly present here He's showing the flag, but it's also entirely possible that when he says he's meeting with people to find out, what's on Quebecers' mind, he doesn't have a clue what's on Quebecers' mind. Yeah.
Agreed.
Couple, you mentioned just off the top in the notes that I'm looking at for today about the nature of Quebec politics changing. So what's the idea of this power politics taking on a new meaning in Quebec?
All of it is basically going to be on hydroelectric power, the future of electricity, changing Quebec society to an electrical one. And as we mentioned last week, the Premier has invited the opposition parties to exchange with him. He's already met today with the PQ. But I mention it today because the Liberals have done something which, as far as I'm concerned, is ostensibly the right thing to do, but also, I think, potentially fiendishly clever. It'll be interesting to see if Legault signs off on it. But what the Liberals are calling for is the creation of a traveling commission of inquiry, if you will, which is going to go across the province, talk to all the regions, talk to Indigenous communities, involve them in the whole process of this energy transition. And given that this issue is now front and center, it'll probably be getting a decent amount of coverage. This is something that literally affects every single person living in Quebec. But what I find lovely about this is they say there will be two MNAs chairing this. One of them will obviously be with the government. The other will be the official opposition, i.e. us. And what a tremendous way and with a super bulletproof justification for the Quebec Liberal Party, which is perceived as the West Island Party of Quebec, to get itself back on the map, to get itself back in the public eye on an issue that doesn't involve language, that doesn't involve Bill 21, that doesn't involve les Anglais. I think if they manage to pull this off, it's going to be a very, very important and necessary achievement for the party if it wants to rebuild. And when I say rebuild, because I just heard you guys talking about the haves, I'm talking about rebuilds that actually work. So there you go. Okay.
I want to ask you one thing about a story I read today in the press. We haven't talked about it at all, and maybe we'll come back to it in the week, suggesting by a columnist there, and I love the headline, which was Les Anglos ne quittent plus le Québec.
Yeah.
And
that's what happened was we discuss the people leaving the island of Montreal.
Yeah.
And we talk about those numbers. But the fact is, this guy took it, I should know his name, but I don't have it in front of me.
Francis Vai.
Deep dives into the StatsCan numbers for interprovincial migration. The fact is, Anglos are coming back. The real winner is BC. Gee, I wonder why they're not having anything in the way of an actual winter over there. But the thing is, Quebec is no longer bleeding Quebecers. And indeed, there are people from Ontario who are moving to Quebec, which, quite frankly, if I was a sovereignist, I would take as very, very bad news indeed, because it means perhaps that the whole, that particular pole that's been hovering over this province for half a century has dissipated, and people are coming here, one, because, the cost of living is lower in Montreal than it is in Toronto, so there's that attraction. But yeah, perhaps people are looking at Quebec through an entirely different optic than the one that we've had sort of like drilled into our eyeballs for the past 50 years. And they're just coming here because they want to be here. And a lot of the stuff that, people, rip their hair out over, that's not an issue for them.
I was just thinking about what the Legault government makes of this. What kind of spin do they put on this when they?
Well, as long as those Anglos make sure they, the official language is French. I don't think the Legault government cares. They'll be happy to get the taxpayers. I don't think it's going to, shift the politics of anything. Certainly not the language policies.
Yeah.
Although I have a sneaking suspicion over the course of this year, you may see some of the rougher edges on Bill 96 sanded down. But yeah, I think to a certain extent, those numbers suggest that perhaps certainly in Canada and to a certain extent in Quebec, perhaps we're talking about two generations here. Perhaps we've actually grown out of that particular tendacious confrontational phase, and people are just looking at Quebec as a place to live on its merits as a place to live, as opposed to sort of some political equation.
Yeah, I mean, I would think Francois Legault would look at that and simply go, look, see, it's not as bad as some Anglos, perhaps the alarmist media in Anglos are letting you believe it is, when in fact there are more Anglos staying than there are leaving. This way to him score some bonus points, I would think.
Well, there's that, but it's funny because you just reminded me, and I hate unfinished business, because you had asked me about the Jean-François Lisée piece in the Toronto Star. We never got around to it because of the demands of the service. But I'll tell you right now, You look up Jean-François Lisée when he was the minister responsible for the francophonie in the government of Pauline Marois, and one of the first things he said when he was talking to the English media was that the last thing the Anglo community in Quebec needs, this was back in 2012, the last thing the Anglo community in Quebec needs are more irritations through that language legislation. Mm-hmm. So, people say things, times change, people say other things. I don't read too much into that.
James Mennie over at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.
Adamant.